They just don't make wrestling games like they used to anymore. Now, understandably, wrestling has become a lot more tame than it once was, and that's fair enough, because they really did get away with some questionable stuff in the late 90s and early 2000s. But one thing that every wrestling fan will undoubtedly miss are the video games brought out around this time. Games like WWF No Mercy, Day of Reckoning, and the one we're discussing today, SmackDown Here Comes the Pain, made up one of the most iconic eras of gaming we've ever seen. Out of all of them though, Here Comes the Pain comfortably receives the most praise from players. So this video is going to ask the question, just how good was SmackDown Here Comes the Pain actually? To kick things off, I have to say that the graphics of this game were well beyond its time. For this era of gaming, the character models and detailing were out of this world. It really was a huge step up from the already impressive SmackDown Shut Your Mouth, which was released just a year before. To add to the great character models were some extremely authentic and crisp looking arenas that emulated some of the most iconic sets we've ever seen in the WWE. Things like the SmackDown Fist looked incredible and even allowed you to climb up onto it during a no DQ match, but we'll get onto that stuff a little bit later. Altogether, there were 18 arenas that you could fight in, including 14 PPV arenas that were all themed. This was just one of many ways that this game could be different every single time you played it. It truly felt like a unique and authentic experience in every single match. Along with the spectacular looking arenas, we also got the most advanced entrances as well. Compared to previous titles, they were miles ahead and really felt like they emulated the personality of each wrestler perfectly. Undertaker's American Badass entrance on the bike or the Legion of Doom's entrance are both great examples of just how advanced this game was for its time. What made this even better was just how many wrestlers there were to choose from as well. The game offered 65 different options across the male and female roster and even sprinkled in some legends for you to use as well, making the possibilities for different matches almost endless. On top of that, each of these 65 superstars had unique movesets with 16 different moves to use, which is already a lot of moves, but when you consider that every move is performed with their own unique personality, it makes it so much more immersive. Little things like Booker T's Spinaroonie or Goldberg doing his signature stomp after hitting the spear all add up to make the game feel like you're actually watching a WWE match. Also, having such a wide range of moves to choose from helps each match flow so nicely. You didn't have to just keep spamming the same move over and over before hitting your finisher. Now you could just use specific moves to target body parts and have a few different options when doing so. This helped to make every match feel like an instant classic, as each one was so unique. It also made the finishers seem so much more meaningful, as you'd slowly been working your way up to hitting it. Speaking of the finishers actually, they did an incredible job with these. I don't know if it's just a slight camera shake when you hit it or what, but they just all felt so impactful. As soon as you hit your finisher, you know it's over, and that's how it should be. Honestly, for a game released in 2003, the gameplay was incredible. It was smooth, felt authentic, and was a ton of fun, but was gameplay alone enough to earn this game the prestigious reputation it has? Well, on top of the already stellar gameplay, SmackDown Here Comes the Pain offered a lot of features for players to try out. Perhaps the main thing to note here is the Create a Wrestler feature, which had kept getting better and better up to this point. In Here Comes the Pain, you could create pretty much any one or thing that you wanted, and had the option to give them their own unique moveset, and even create animations for them so that they emulated the wrestler they were modelled after. This meant that if there was a wrestler missing from the game that you really wanted to use, you could just make a very detailed version of them and it would genuinely feel like it was them. Wrestlers like Jeff Hardy could be made almost exactly like he would have been, which is a big plus, no doubt. I think one of the most memorable and cool features of this game though was the ability to exit the arena and wrestle either backstage or even in the streets of the city you were in. We've never seen this level of backstage wrestling since, and honestly it was insane. You could wrestle in fountains, on the side of buildings, and you could even use a helicopter to jump onto your opponent from. It was utter chaos. Even just the backstage areas in the arena were so in depth. You could ride forklifts and motorbikes, wrestle in cages, break stuff, and interact with almost everything around you, which to this day is far more than you can do now. I remember having so much fun just roaming around and fighting in all of these areas as a kid. And that's what made this game so memorable. It was unique and just so much fun to play, but even if you weren't exploring the town and jumping off buildings, the amount of match types you could do in the ring was more than enough. There were a total of 11 different stipulations, including the Elimination Chamber for the first time, which was so incredible to see in the games. With the brutal gameplay of Here Comes the Pain, the chamber just felt so ominous and massive, just like it did in real life. However, even if you did somehow get bored of playing one-off matches, you always had Season Mode as well, which offered a story-based playthrough that could actually go on for as long as you wanted it to. Over the span of a year, you can take part in multiple different angles, including a variety of wrestlers, management, and titles, so your run will be very unique if you play through multiple times. The only slight issue is that if you do choose to play more than a year, the storylines might well repeat themselves. But seeing as they were all pretty engaging and fun, this wasn't really an issue. Also, it would take you at least another year to experience every single storyline on offer, so the second year would be different enough for it to be engaging still. What's also cool about the season mode is that you can choose the champions and that will decide what happens throughout the run. And even when you're playing, there are constantly options to align with certain people and turn heel or face, so there's a lot you can do to make your run as unique as possible. Every decision you make when playing affects the outcome, allowing you to craft your own path on the way to winning the main belt. Season mode could easily keep you entertained for hours and had a fair bit of replay value, which made it the perfect option for when you'd eventually get bored of playing one-off matches. For what it was at the time, you can't really fault it. I'm sure most players loved the fact that you could continue on for as long as you wanted to, regardless of the repeating storylines, as the game was already fun to play, and having that added purpose made it even more immersive. It did have its limitations, like the fact that a lot of the time you couldn't hear the characters speak in cutscenes, but having the dialogue there meant that this wasn't really an issue. Overall, the game was just fun. It didn't take itself too seriously, but went above and beyond when trying to make it feel authentic and as close to the real thing as possible. The action in the ring was fast-paced and exciting, whilst the cutscenes and entrances all gave the characters so much personality. Not to mention the fact that the customization was so good. You could have an almost infinite amount of different matches with different wrestlers in different arenas, and each one would be as memorable as the last. It was the ultimate game to load up with your friends, sit back and play for hours. I personally believe that SmackDown Here Comes the Pain is the greatest wrestling game of all time.